We're back with Ben Buckner from the AgResource Company from Chicago. He's based in London, in England, and he's going to speak what the soybean index for the Chicago Mercantile Exchange would mean for the market. Here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. Stay tuned and don't forget to subscribe. Ben, how are you today? How is London? A little bit foggy?
It is getting that way. We've had some nice weather recently, but I think the rain is on its way. It's not going to stop until, I guess, next summer. So it's that time of the year.
Yeah, so I would like to start from the point of a new option in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, that is the South American soybeans. What do you think that will mean for the market, and if that is going to work this time around, because it's not first attempt?
Yeah, that's right. The CME's second time at attempting to have a soybean contract based in South America and Brazil. There's a better chance this time. And I think it's just because Brazil's footprint in the world soybean market has gotten so much bigger since then. I mean, maybe I think it's tripled in terms of trade. And so it's really important, especially when you see something like in 2018 when the U.S.-Chinese trade war started. One of the things that I think everyone could see or knew what would happen was that, Brazilian basis and cash prices were going to skyrocket as the U.S. market collapsed. And so there was really nothing you could do about that really in terms of hedging or speculating, because Brazil's market is solely based on cash and it's based on the Board of Trade. But now that they have two different contracts, that is the first thing I think people will be thinking about is international politics. Does that really affect the spread between the U.S. and Brazil? So now we have a way of doing that. I also think it is helpful, and we hope that it is successful. The cash prices are settled based on Platts Port of Santos cash data. And so just knowing that is helpful, and it does help market transparency. Even today, when the contracts aren't really trading yet, they do give us updated cash settlements. So we can see where the cash market is in Brazil on a daily basis. And so that's really, really helpful. I think one of the issues that we've heard since the contract launched is that it has kind of come as a surprise to some of the bigger players, and really the two places that would have the most benefit of this contract. I think it was kind of a surprise to the Brazilian farmer, and also a surprise to the Chinese crusher that this contract was even being launched. It just doesn't sound like there was a lot of marketing done. And that's really going to be the natural buyer, the natural seller of this contract. So China buying Brazilian soybeans and the Brazilian farmer selling. So as long as the CME can get those two groups to use this instrument, then it probably takes off and does very, very well. But that's the goal of the CME, I think, is to really sell this product through marketing and face-to-face contact within China and the rest of East Asia, and also within Brazil. So it doesn't seem like many people were aware that the contract even existed prior to a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, taking advantage that you are in England right now, I would like to ask you about the US dollar. The US dollar index has been somewhat weaker in the last couple of months. But at the same time, the US dollar has been stronger against some key emerging market currencies. How do you evaluate that, and how much of the US election impacts on that?
The election is going to have a big impact on, I think, every market across the world, agriculture, financial, and so at least on election night, we can expect humongous volatility. And so it will affect the dollar as well. And really, I think it all comes down to relative performance. So we've seen in all of these emerged markets, interest rates are near or at zero. So at that point, you just have to kind of take your pick. What will be the safest bet? And U.S. economic data is mixed, but there is, I still think, money being poured into the U.S. equities. It's still a safe haven for any time that we see coronavirus cases, like in Western Europe, start to explode again. I think you'll have money leave the euro and find the U.S. dollar, and that's a lot of what that index is calculated on. The U.S. dollar index really is just a measure of its performance against the euro, and so that is what I think we've seen in terms of volatility. Interest rates staying near zero in the U.S. was bearish the dollar, but now that we've got rising COVID cases and economic uncertainty in Europe, we've seen money come back to the U.S. dollar, and I think that's broadly what explains those movements.
Yes, and what can you tell us about the crops in Europe, or what has caught attention during the week?
Well, it's really all focused now, excuse me, on drought in Russia. I think the crop losses in Europe last year have been digested. In fact, there's enough wheat in Western Europe that we're starting to see like exporters in Germany and the Baltic countries start to undercut Russia and find export demand. So there's no shortage of grain, but we really don't know, as an industry, what to do with Russian wheat seedings and production for 2021. It's a rare event, severe drought. We have seen similar dryness in southern Russia, these major oblasts there that grow a lot and export a lot of wheat. We've seen dryness like this recently, but it always is solved in October by normal to above normal rainfall. This year, the forecast is still very, very dry into the middle of October. One rain event solves this. It's very difficult to correlate autumn weather with production and yield, but we're just hearing that seeds are not germinating. There's just no moisture in the soils, or that planting has been halted entirely. And during the second half of October, it starts to get very, very late, and there's some general correlation with yield loss if it's planted after a certain date. So you can plug in any number you want to for 2021 Russian production, whether it's 50 million tons, maybe it's still 80 or 85 million tons. But if it's at the low end of this range, all of a sudden the wheat market gets very, very tight, and we have this could be lasting supply-driven bull market. And so that is a scenario. Now, if it rains in the next 3 weeks, then this problem is solved, and wheat market probably goes down. But for now, it's very, very dry, and there's really no rain in the forecast.
And how many million metric tons are we talking about of possible loss in Russia?
If we assume that the crops in the south don't germinate or are not planted prior to freezing temperatures, you could probably lose 15 or 20 million tons. So that would be a crop of 60, 64, something like that. That's probably not the most likely scenario, but it is a scenario. And I think the market just takes a look at the 2-week weather forecast and assumes it's correct. And as of right now, it does not look like it's going to rain much, if at all, in that key area of southern Russia. So it's very, very dicey at the moment.
And how many of those metric tons are exportable? Roughly all of them?
All of them, yeah. All of the wheat, or nearly all of the wheat grown in that south part of Russia is exportable. They benefit from their production down there being very close to export terminals. So it's very easy to you get wheat from the producer in the south, ship it through the Black Sea onto the rest of the world. So it's the hub of world wheat exports at the moment, and it's also the driest portion of the northern hemisphere at the moment. So it's very, very uncertain.
So it seems that it would be good news for the Kansas farmer.
So far, yes, and potentially it could be very good news. It's just very, very uncertain. And again, if it rains one time, this problem is solved. But for now, losing that much of potential Russian production finally would, I think, funnel world wheat demand to the U.S. for the first time in a couple of years. So it would look much better for the U.S. farmer.
Okay, Ben, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Louis. It's been a pleasure as always.